I never imagined my credit card bill would shatter my entire world. What started as a simple family gathering turned into a nightmare that would change my life forever. My name is Rachel Anderson, and this is the story of how my husband and his family orchestrated the biggest betrayal of my life. The sun was setting over the Denver skyline as I pulled into our Cherry Creek townhouse driveway. I was exhausted from a long day at the marketing firm, but excited to host dinner with David's family. After 3 years of marriage, I still tried, desperately to win over my mother-in-law Patricia's approval. If only I knew what they had planned for that evening. Our townhouse, a modern 3-story unit we'd purchased just 8 months ago, was my pride and joy. I'd spent countless hours decorating each room, trying to create the perfect space for our future family. The warm autumn breeze carried the scent of my carefully prepared pot roast through the open windows. Everything had to be perfect. David arrived home shortly after, greeting me with his usual charm. His sales job at the tech company had been going well, or so he claimed. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs, the hushed phone calls, the suspicious meetings with his family, the way he'd been love-bombing me for weeks leading up to that fateful dinner. Patricia arrived first, perfectly coiffed in her designer outfit, followed by Amy and Mark, David's siblings. Robert, my father-in-law, shuffled in last, looking uncomfortable. There was an energy in the room I couldn't quite place, a tension that made my skin crawl. I busied myself serving drinks, playing the perfect hostess while they exchanged knowing looks. The conversation flowed easily enough through dinner, though I noticed they kept steering it toward finances, my recent promotion, our joint accounts, my excellent credit score. I'd always been proud of my financial responsibility, but something about their intense interest made me uneasy. It wasn't until dessert that Patricia cleared her throat, setting down her wine glass with a deliberate clink. "Rachel, dear," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we need to discuss something important." David reached for my hand under the table, but his grip felt less like comfort and more like restraint. What came next would turn my world upside down. Little did I know, this dinner was just the beginning of a journey that would test my strength, reshape my boundaries, and ultimately lead me to reclaim my power. But first, I had to survive the shock of what my husband and his family had been plotting behind my back. If you want to know what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you ever experienced financial manipulation from family members? Let me know in the comments section. Stay tuned for part 2 of my story, where I reveal the devastating truth about my husband's betrayal. Patricia's voice cut through the tension like a knife as she pulled out a stack of glossy magazines from her designer bag. "Rachel, darling," she cooed, spreading them across our dining table, completely disregarding the careful place settings I'd arranged. The annual Anderson family shopping tradition is coming up this weekend at Cherry Creek Shopping Center. The pit in my stomach grew as I watched David's siblings, Amy and Mark, exchange knowing glances. Something about their eager expressions made me deeply uncomfortable. I'd heard about this tradition before, their yearly shopping spree where the entire Anderson family would update their wardrobes, but I'd never been invited to participate in the previous years. "This year is special," Patricia continued, her perfectly manicured finger tapping on a page featuring luxury brands. "We're all attending the charity gala next month, and naturally, we need to represent the Anderson name properly." She paused, her eyes gleaming with something that made me shiver. "David tells me you recently received quite a substantial promotion at your marketing firm." The room felt suffocating as all eyes turned to me. David squeezed my hand under the table, but there was something different about his touch, possessive rather than supportive. I thought about the promotion I'd worked so hard for, the late nights and endless presentations that had finally paid off. The raise was significant, but I'd been planning to invest most of it, maybe start that small business I'd always dreamed about. "We've always done this as a family," Amy chimed in, her voice sickly sweet. And now that you're one of us, it's only right that you participate fully. The emphasis she placed on the word fully made my skin crawl. Robert, my father-in-law, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, staring down at his half-eaten dessert. He'd always been the quietest member of the family, but tonight his silence spoke volumes. I watched as he exchanged a brief, concerned look with David, who quickly looked away. "I don't understand," I said carefully, setting down my fork. "What exactly are you suggesting?" But deep down, I already knew. The way they'd been praising my financial responsibility all evening, the casual mentions of my credit limit, the subtle hints about family obligations, it was all falling into place. Patricia's smile widened, reminding me of a predator about to pounce. "Well, as the newest Anderson, it's your turn to treat the family. We've all done it. David hosted the spree 3 years ago before you were in the picture. Amy did it last year, and Mark the year before that." She waved her hand dismissively. "It's tradition." The room started spinning slightly as I processed her words. "The entire family's shopping spree?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "For the gala?" "Not just the gala, dear," Patricia corrected, her tone condescending. "The whole winter wardrobe. Shoes, accessories, everything. We are Andersons, after all. We have a reputation to maintain." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be a list. "I've already made appointments at Neiman Marcus, Saks, and a few other boutiques. We'll start early Saturday morning." I looked at David, hoping to see some sign of support, some indication that this was all a misunderstanding. Instead, he smiled that charming smile that had first made me fall in love with him. "Honey, it's really not a big deal. You're making more than enough now to handle this. Plus, think of how much closer you'll be to the family after this." My mind raced to our recent conversations about finances, how he'd casually asked about my credit card limits, insisted on seeing my latest pay stubs for the family financial planning. It all made horrible sense now. The total shouldn't be more than 30 or 40,000, Amy added casually, as if she were discussing the weather. Less if we find good sales, though Mother has her heart set on that new Gucci collection. The number hit me like a physical blow. $40,000. That was more than half of my annual salary, even with the new promotion. I thought about my careful savings, my dreams of starting my own business, the plans I'd made for our future. I started, but Patricia cut me off. "It's not just about the shopping, Rachel," she said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "It's about proving your commitment to this family. David has done so much for you, given you access to our social circle, our connections. Surely you can show your appreciation in return." The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. I looked around the table at the faces of my in-laws. Patricia's calculated smile, Amy's barely concealed glee, Mark's studied indifference, Robert's obvious discomfort. And David. David just sat there, expecting me to sacrifice my financial security for his family's shopping addiction. "I need some air," I managed to say, pushing back from the table. The scrape of my chair against the hardwood floor seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. I walked to our back patio, my legs shaking slightly. The cool Denver evening air helped clear my head, but it couldn't erase the reality of what was happening. Through the glass doors, I could hear them talking, their voices muffled, but their tones clear. Patricia was saying something about testing, her commitment, while Amy complained about needing new boots. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over Jess's contact. My best friend had never liked David, had warned me about the Anderson family's materialism, but I'd been so sure I could handle it, so convinced that love would be enough. Before I could make the call, David joined me on the patio. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his cologne, the expensive one his mother had given him, overwhelming my senses. "Baby," he whispered, "don't make this difficult. It's just money. We can make more." I pulled away from him, turning to look into his eyes. "It's not just money, David. It's my money, my hard work, my future." His expression hardened slightly. "Our future," he corrected. "We're married, remember? What's yours is mine. And my family is part of that package. You knew who we were when you married me." Did I? I wondered. Had I really known what I was getting into, or had I been so blinded by love that I'd ignored all the red flags, the extravagant gifts they expected, the constant pressure to maintain appearances, the subtle digs at my middle-class background? "I can't spend that much money on a shopping spree," I said firmly. "It's not responsible, and it's not fair to ask me to do this." David's face changed then, showing a side of him I'd never seen before. "Not fair?" he scoffed. "What's not?" "Fair is how you've benefited from our family name while contributing nothing in return."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"Do you think you would have gotten that promotion without my father's connection to the firm's owner?" The accusation stung, especially because I knew it wasn't true. I'd earned every step of my career advancement through hard work and talent. But before I could defend myself, Patricia's voice rang out from the doorway. "I believe this is very simple, Rachel," she said, her tone icily polite. "Either you're an Anderson or you're not. And if you're not..." She let the threat hang, in the air. I looked past her into the dining room, where Amy was already scrolling through her phone, probably planning her purchases. Mark was texting, likely updating his girlfriend about the drama. Only Robert met my gaze, and in his eyes, I saw something that looked like pity. The weight of the decision pressed down on me. This wasn't really about a shopping spree. It was about control, about proving my submission to their demands. If I gave in now, where would it end? Next month's credit card bill? Next year's vacation? Our future children's education fund? "I need time to think," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is a lot to process." Patricia's lips thinned in disapproval. "The appointments are already made for Saturday. We don't have time for your..." middle-class hesitation. She spat the words like they tasted bad in her mouth. David grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in slightly. "Just say yes, Rachel. Don't embarrass me in front of my family." In that moment, looking into his eyes, I saw our entire relationship clearly for the first time. Every compromise I'd made, every boundary I'd let them cross, every time I'd silenced my own voice to keep the peace. The perfect townhouse suddenly felt like a beautiful cage, and I was the bird they expected to sing on command. "I need to use the bathroom," I said quietly, pulling away from David's grip. Instead of heading to our ensuite, I went to my home office, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I opened my laptop, logging into my bank account. The numbers stared back at me, my savings, my carefully managed credit cards, my financial freedom. Through the door, I could hear them talking about me, their voices carrying up the stairs. "She's being ridiculous," Amy said. "It's not like we're asking for that much." "Give her time," David replied. "She'll come around. She always does." The confidence in his voice, the certainty that he could manipulate me into compliance, made something snap inside me. I opened a new tab and started typing an email to Sarah Klein, a lawyer whose card I'd kept after meeting her at a networking event. The subject line was simple: "Urgent consultation needed." As I typed out my concerns, I heard footsteps approaching my office door. "Rachel?" David called out, his voice honeyed again. "Baby, come back downstairs. Let's talk about this rationally." I hit send on the email, then pulled up another window. This time, I logged into my personal credit card account, the one David didn't know about. the emergency fund I'd maintained even after marriage. Something told me I was going to need it. 1 minute, I called back, my voice perfectly calm. I'm just freshening up. I looked around my office, at the degrees on the wall, the awards I'd earned, the vision board filled with my dreams and goals. None of them included being financially manipulated by my in-laws. None of them involved sacrificing my self-respect for the sake of appearances. A text message lit up my phone, Jess checking in on me as if she somehow sensed something was wrong. Everything okay? Haven't heard from you all evening. I stared at her message, thinking about all the times she'd offered me a safe space. No questions asked. About how she'd never judged me, even when I'd chosen David over her concerns. About how she'd kept our friendship alive even when Patricia had tried to isolate me from my old life. Rachel! David's voice was more insistent now. Mother's waiting. Don't be rude. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and looked at myself in the small office mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who had eagerly prepared dinner just hours ago, hoping to finally win her mother-in-law's approval. This woman had steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. I texted Jess back, "No, everything's not okay. Can I come over tonight?" Her response was immediate. "Door's open, wine's ready." I gathered my laptop, phone, and the small emergency bag I kept in my office closet, another precaution I'd taken without really knowing why. Then I unlocked the door, ready to face whatever came next. The Andersons were about to learn that some things couldn't be bought, manipulated, or demanded. My self-respect was one of them. And as I prepared to walk downstairs, I realized this wasn't just about a shopping spree anymore. This was about reclaiming my voice, my boundaries, and my future. The tension in the room was palpable as I descended the stairs, my emergency bag clutched tightly against my chest. Patricia's eyes immediately zeroed in on the bag, her perfectly plucked eyebrows arching in displeasure. David stepped forward, his face contorting with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, maintaining the distance between us. The movement caught everyone's attention, and suddenly, all eyes were on me. Even Robert looked up from his perpetual study of the floor. "I'm not doing this," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. "I won't be manipulated into spending my savings on your family's shopping addiction." The words hung in the air, sharp and clear, like shattered glass. Patricia rose from her seat, her designer heels clicking ominously against our hardwood floors. "Addiction?" She spat the word out like poison. "How dare you? This is about family tradition, about loyalty." She turned to David, her voice dripping with venom. "I told you she wasn't Anderson material. Too common, too concerned with money." "The money I earned," I corrected her, feeling a surge of strength. "The money I worked for, stayed late for, sacrificed for. And you want me to blow it all on Gucci bags and Prada shoes?" Amy jumped in, her face flushed with indignation. "You're just jealous because you didn't grow up with class. This is how proper families operate." She gestured around our townhouse. "You think you'd have any of this without us?" I laughed then, a sound that surprised even me. "Without you? I bought this townhouse. My name is on the mortgage. My credit score got us the loan. I picked every piece of furniture, chose every paint color, made every payment." David's face darkened. "Our money, Rachel. Our house. That's what marriage means." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that still somehow carried across the room. "Don't do this. Don't embarrass me in front of my family." "Embarrass you?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Like you're embarrassing me right now? Ambushing me with demands to bankrupt myself for your family's vanity?" Patricia moved then, placing herself between David and me. "Listen here, you ungrateful little gold digger," she hissed. "My son gave you everything. A place in our society, connections, status. The least you could do is show some appreciation. Gold digger? I repeated, incredulous. I'm the one being asked to hand over my credit cards. I'm the one being pressured to spend my savings. How exactly does that make me a gold digger? The room fell silent for a moment, broken only by the sound of Mark's uncomfortable shifting in his chair. Then David spoke, his voice taking on that persuasive tone he used to close big sales deals. Baby, you're overreacting. It's just money. We can make more. Think about what this means for our future, for our place in the family. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw something I'd been blind to before. The manipulative glint in his eyes, the practiced way he tried to minimize my concerns, the implicit threat in his words. How had I never noticed these things before? Our future? I said softly. What future? One where I have to beg for permission to spend my own money? Where your family's wants trump our needs? Where I'm expected to bankrupt myself to prove my worth? Now you're just being dramatic, Amy interjected, rolling her eyes. It's not bankruptcy. It's just $40,000. Just $40,000? I repeated, the absurdity of it hitting me anew. Do you even hear yourself? That's more than some people make in a year. That's a down payment on a house. That's startup capital for a business. That's not just anything. Patricia's face hardened. Well, if you can't handle the responsibilities of being an Anderson, perhaps you should reconsider your position in this family. The threat was clear, but instead of fear, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Maybe I should, I agreed, surprising them all. Maybe I should reconsider everything. David's charm vanished instantly. What exactly are you saying? He demanded, his voice dangerous and low. I took another step back, clutching my bag tighter. I'm saying I'm leaving. I'm saying I won't be part of your shopping spree, your manipulation, or your twisted family dynamics anymore. You can't leave, David said, his voice rising. You're my wife. You have obligations. Obligations? I laughed again, but this time it was a hollow sound. Like the obligation you had to protect me? To stand up for me? To be a partner instead of a puppet? I watched as his face contorted with rage, an expression I'd never seen before. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm roughly. You're not going anywhere. That's when Robert finally spoke. Up, his quiet voice cutting through the tension. David, let her go. Everyone turned to stare at him in shock. He stood up slowly, his eyes meeting mine. Let her go, son. This isn't right, and you know it. David's grip loosened slightly, enough for me to pull away. Patricia rounded on her husband. Robert, how dare you interfere? This is about family unity. No, Robert said firmly, surprising us all again. This is about control. It always has been. He turned to me, his eyes sad. I'm sorry, Rachel. I should have said something sooner. Should have stopped this years ago. Patricia's face turned an alarming shade of red. Have you lost your mind? After everything we've built, everything we've established in this community? Community? Robert scoffed. Is that what we're calling it now? This endless cycle of spending and showing off? Using money to control our children and their spouses? He shook his head. I'm done being silent. The room erupted into chaos. Patricia was screaming at Robert. Amy was crying about family loyalty. Mark was trying to calm everyone down, and David. David was staring at me with a look of pure hatred. In the midst of the mayhem, I edged toward the front door. My hand was on the doorknob when David noticed. If you walk out that door, he called out, his voice cutting through the noise. Don't bother coming back. I turned to face them one last time. This strange collection of people who had tried to break my spirit in the name of family tradition. I'd rather sleep in my car than spend another minute being manipulated by you. With that, I opened the door and stepped out into the cool Denver night. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's shrill voice. "David, do something! Stop her!" But I was already moving, my heels clicking rapidly against the pavement as I half walked, half ran to my car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, but I managed to get the door open and slide inside just as David appeared on the front steps. "Rachel!" he shouted, starting down the driveway. "Don't you dare drive away! We're not finished!" But we were finished. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, watching in my rearview mirror as David's figure grew smaller and smaller. I could see Patricia and Amy on the porch, their mouths moving in what I assumed were more threats and insults. Only Robert remained in the doorway, and I swore I saw him give me a small nod. My vision blurred with tears as I navigated the familiar streets of Cherry Creek, heading toward Jess's apartment in Lodo. My phone started buzzing incessantly. Text messages, calls, voicemails pouring in. I ignored them all, focusing on the road ahead and the rhythm of my breathing. It wasn't until I was halfway to Jess's place that the full impact of what I'd done hit me. I'd walked away from my marriage, my home, my life as I knew it. All because I'd finally found the courage to say no to their demands, to stand up for myself. At a red light, I quickly checked my phone. Among the dozens of missed calls and angry texts from the Andersons was a single message from Sarah Klein, the lawyer. "Can meet first thing tomorrow. Stay safe tonight." The light turned green, and I pressed the accelerator, feeling a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done letting the Andersons control my life. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. As Denver's nighttime skyline came into view, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Freedom. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once, like standing on the edge of a cliff and finally choosing to spread your wings instead of backing away. I turned onto Jess's street, spotting her familiar building. She was already waiting outside, 2 glasses of wine in hand. As I parked and stepped out of my car, the weight of the evening's events threatened to crush me. But then Jess wrapped me in a tight hug, and I knew that while I'd lost a toxic family tonight, I still had people in my corner who loved me for who I was, not for what I could buy them. "Come on," Jess said softly, leading me inside. "Let's get you upstairs. You can tell me everything when you're ready." As the elevator doors closed behind us, I heard my phone buzz one more time. It was a text from Robert. "You did the right thing. Stay strong." Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone in this as I thought. Jess's apartment felt like stepping into a different world. The familiar scent of her lavender candles and the soft hum of the city below created a cocoon of safety I desperately needed. She guided me to her oversized couch, wrapped me in her softest throw blanket, and pressed a glass of wine into my trembling hands. My phone continued its relentless buzzing. 17 missed calls from David, 23 text messages from Patricia, and countless notifications from Amy and Mark. I silenced it without reading any of them. The only message I'd acknowledge was an email confirmation from Sarah Klein's office for a 9 a.m. appointment. "You're shaking," Jess observed quietly, settling beside me. Her cat, Luna, immediately curled up in my lap, purring softly as if she sensed my distress. What did they do this time? The words poured out of me then, every horrible detail of the evening. The ambush at dinner, Patricia's demands, David's betrayal, the threats, the manipulation. With each revelation, Jess's expression darkened, but she let me talk without interruption. $40,000, I whispered, staring into my wine glass. They wanted me to spend $40,000 on a shopping spree, like it was nothing, like I was nothing except their personal ATM. Jess set her glass down with more force than necessary. Those entitled, manipulative. She took a deep breath, visibly calming herself. Okay, first things first. You're staying here as long as you need. The guest room is yours. A wave of gratitude washed over me. I can't impose. Stop. She cut me off firmly. You're not imposing. You're escaping financial abuse. There's a difference. She reached for her laptop. Now let's make a list of what we need to do. The pragmatic approach was exactly what I needed. Together, we spent the next hour making calls and sending emails. I froze my credit cards, changed all my passwords, and sent secure messages to my bank flagging potential unauthorized access attempts. David's name isn't on any of your personal accounts, right? Jess asked, taking notes. No, I replied, feeling a surge of relief at my past caution. We kept most things separate. He always complained about it, said I had trust issues. I laughed bitterly. Guess those trust issues were justified. Around midnight, exhaustion hit me like a wave. Jess showed me to her guest room, where she'd already laid out pajamas and fresh towels. Get some sleep, she urged. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But sleep proved elusive. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, my mind replaying every red flag I'd ignored throughout my marriage. The way David always deferred to his mother's wishes. How Patricia would make snide comments about my modest background. The constant pressure to spend more, appear more, be more. My phone lit up again, a text from Robert. Patricia and David are planning something. Be careful tomorrow. Document everything. A chill ran down my spine. I forwarded the message to Sarah Klein, then tried to get some rest. Tomorrow would indeed be a long day. Morning came too quickly. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Jess's voice in the living room. She was on the phone, her tone professional but firm. Yes, I understand it's a sensitive situation, but as her emergency contact, yes, I'll hold. I emerged from the guest room to find her pacing, still in her nursing scrubs from her night shift. She covered the phone's mouthpiece. I called in a favor at the hospital's legal department. They're helping me draft a temporary restraining order just in case. Before I could respond, my own phone rang. The caller ID showed my office. With trembling fingers, I answered. Rachel? It was my boss, Janet. I just received a concerning call from your husband. He claims you're having some sort of breakdown, that you've abandoned your home and family. He's demanding access to your work email and files. My blood ran cold. So this was their play, trying to discredit me professionally. Janet, I can explain everything. No need, she interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. I know gaslighting when I hear it. Take whatever time you need, your job is secure. I've already flagged this with HR and IT security. Tears of relief sprang to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. After a quick shower and change into clothes Jess had picked up from a nearby Target, we headed to Sarah Klein's office. The lawyer's workspace was warm and welcoming, with none of the intimidating decor I'd expected. First things first, Sarah said after listening to my story. What you've experienced is financial abuse, and we're going to document everything. She pulled out a recorder. I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Every demand, every threat, every attempt at control. For the next 2 hours, I talked. Sarah took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression serious. Here's what we're dealing with, she explained. They've already started their smear campaign, calling your workplace, probably contacting mutual friends. They're trying to paint you as unstable, unreliable. Classic abuser tactics. What do we do? I asked, fighting back panic. We fight back smart, she replied, pulling out a legal pad. First, we file for an emergency separation order. Then, we secure your assets. The townhouse might be complicated since it's your primary residence, but given that you're the primary mortgage holder. A knock at her office door interrupted us. Her assistant poked her head in, looking concerned. "I'm sorry, but there's a situation in the lobby. Mr. Anderson and his mother are here, demanding to speak with you." My heart started racing. Sarah's expression hardened. "Call security," she instructed her assistant. Then, to me, "Stay here. Don't engage with them. Let me handle this." Through the office walls, I could hear David's voice rising, Patricia's, shrill demands echoing through the building. Jess grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight as Sarah strode out to confront them. "This is a private legal office," Sarah's voice carried clearly. "You are trespassing. Leave now, or I will have you removed." "That's my wife in there," David shouted. "You have no right to keep her from me." "She has every right to seek legal counsel," Sarah responded calmly. "Now any further communication needs to go through proper legal channels. Security is on their way. Make the smart choice." "You think this will work?" Patricia's voice dripped with venom. "We know people in this town, Miss Klein. Important people. This little power play of yours is on video," Sarah interrupted, smoothly. "As is your trespassing and attempted intimidation. Would you like me to continue recording for the judge?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then, the sound of heels clicking on marble, growing fainter. David's final words drifted back. "This isn't over." When Sarah returned, her expression was grim but satisfied. "Well, they've just made our case much stronger. Attempting to intimidate you at your lawyer's office? Not a good look." She pulled out more paperwork. "Now, let's talk about immediate protective measures. Based on their behavior, I recommend we file for a temporary restraining order. We should also..." The rest of the day passed in a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and strategic planning. By evening, I had a clear path forward. Emergency. Separation papers were filed, a restraining order was in process, and my assets were protected. Back at Jess's apartment, I finally checked my email. Among the dozens of messages from David and his family was one that made my heart stop. A notification from my credit card company about unusual activity. "They tried to use your cards?" Jess asked, reading over my shoulder. "Tried," I confirmed, feeling a surge of gratitude for our quick action in freezing the accounts. Failed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Amy. "Hope you're happy. Mom's in tears, David's drinking, and you've ruined everything. The shopping? Trip is tomorrow, and now we all look like fools. Is that what you wanted?" I showed the message to Jess, who snorted in disgust. "The only fools here are them, thinking they could bully you into bankruptcy." "I just don't understand," I said softly, watching the city lights flicker outside. Jess's window. How did I not see this coming? How did I let it get this far? Jess wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Because they're expert manipulators, and you wanted to believe in love. That's not a character flaw, Rachel. That's being human." Another text came through, this one from Robert. "They're at the house packing your things. I'm trying to stop them, but..." Attached was a photo of David and Patricia going through my closet, throwing designer items, the ones they'd pressured me to buy, into boxes. "Oh, hell no," Jess muttered, already dialing Sarah's number. "We're not letting them get away with this." As she updated the lawyer, I sat on her couch, watching Luna chase shadows on the wall. My entire life was being packed into boxes by people who claimed to love me, all because I'd refused to bankrupt myself for their vanity. But underneath the pain and fear, something else was growing. Determination. They wanted to break me, to punish me for standing up for myself. Instead, they were making me stronger, showing me exactly who they were and what I needed to protect myself from. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The shopping spree they'd planned would now be a day of legal meetings and police reports. The life I'd built with David was crumbling, but maybe that was necessary. Sometimes you have to tear everything down to rebuild something better. My phone buzzed one final time. Janet from work. Taking you off the project rotation for now, but your job is secure. Take care of yourself. We've got your back. I closed my eyes, letting the support of these strong women wash over me. The Andersons had tried to isolate me, to make me dependent on them. Instead, they'd shown me who my real family was. The friends who stood by me, the colleagues who believed in me, the professionals who fought for me. Tomorrow would be another battle. But tonight, in this safe space with my best friend and her cat, I could finally breathe. I didn't need designer clothes or social status to be worthy. I just needed to be myself, to stand in my truth, and to keep fighting for what was right. The war wasn't over, but I was no longer fighting alone. Dawn broke over Denver's skyline as I sat in Sarah Klein's office, surrounded by mountains of financial documents. The morning light cast long shadows across the scattered papers, bank statements, credit card bills, mortgage documents, and text messages that painted a disturbing picture of financial manipulation. Sarah typed furiously on her laptop, her face grim as she reviewed the evidence. "The timestamp on these texts is crucial," she muttered, highlighting another message from Patricia. "See how they escalated the pressure after your promotion? Classic, predatory behavior." My hands trembled as I sorted through another stack of papers. Each document told a story of subtle control, of boundaries slowly eroded. There were the small loans David had pressured me to give his siblings, always with promises of repayment that never materialized. The joint credit card statements showing Patricia's unauthorized shopping sprees, which David had insisted I cover to keep the peace. A knock on the door interrupted our review. Sarah's assistant entered with a fresh pot of coffee and an urgent expression. "The Anderson family's lawyer just called. They're demanding an immediate meeting." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Of course they are. The shopping spree was supposed to start an hour ago. They're probably standing outside Neiman Marcus wondering why their cash cow isn't there to foot the bill." My phone buzzed with another text from Amy. "You've humiliated us. We're all here, waiting. Mom's crying in the parking lot. How could you be so selfish?" I showed the message to Sarah, who immediately added it to her growing file of evidence. "They really don't get it, do they?" she mused, shaking her head. "They're still trying to guilt you into compliance even now." A sharp rap at the office door made us both jump. Sarah's assistant hurried back in, looking flustered. "Mr. Anderson's lawyer is here. He's insisting on speaking with you." Sarah straightened her blazer, her expression hardening. "Stay here," she instructed me. "Document everything you hear, but don't engage. Remember, you have a temporary restraining order in place." Through the thin walls, I could hear the conversation in the reception area. The smooth, cultured voice of James Whitney, the Anderson family's longtime lawyer, carried clearly. "This is a simple misunderstanding between family members," he was saying. "Surely we can resolve this without all the legal drama. Mrs. Anderson is simply overwhelmed with her new responsibilities. My clients are very concerned about her mental state." My blood boiled at his condescending tone, the way he dismissed my legitimate concerns as mere hysteria. But Sarah's response was cool and professional. "Your clients attempted to coerce my client into spending $40,000 against her will. They've engaged in documented patterns of financial abuse, made threats, and violated boundaries. Repeatedly. This isn't a misunderstanding, Mr. Whitney. This is a legal matter." Now. Whitney's voice took on an oily quality. "The Andersons are a respected family in this community. They have certain expectations of their members, traditions that must be maintained." Traditions? Sarah's voice could have frozen hell. "Is that what we're calling financial exploitation? Now? Because I have dozens of text messages here that tell a very different story." The conversation continued, growing more heated. I focused on documenting everything, just as Sarah had instructed. but my hands shook as I typed, remembering all the times the Andersons had used their respected status to justify their demands. My phone lit up again. Another message from Robert. They're planning something. Whitney isn't there just to talk. Be careful. As if on cue, Whitney's voice rose. My clients are prepared to be generous. They're willing to overlook this incident. Mrs. Anderson can return home and all will be forgiven. They'll even reduce the shopping budget to $20,000. A very reasonable compromise. I felt sick to my stomach. They still didn't understand. This wasn't about the money. It was about control, about respect, about basic human dignity. Sarah's response was immediate and sharp. My client isn't interested in compromises that involve financial exploitation. Now, unless you have something substantive to discuss, this meeting is over. You're making a mistake. Whitney's voice turned cold. The Andersons have considerable influence in this city. It would be a shame if Mrs. Anderson's emotional instability became public knowledge. Her career could suffer. The threat hung in the air like poison. But before Sarah could respond, another voice joined the conversation. Jess, arriving for our scheduled meeting. Are you threatening my friend? Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Because I have some interesting things to say about emotional instability, like how Mrs. Patricia Anderson screamed at a barista last week for using whole milk instead of almond milk. I have video, actually. Would the community like to see that? The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Whitney's voice, notably less confident. This isn't over. Actually, it is, Sarah replied. Any further communication needs to go through proper legal channels. And Mr. Whitney, the next time you attempt to threaten my client, I'll file an ethics complaint with the Bar Association. The sound of retreating footsteps, then Sarah and Jess entered the office. Jess immediately rushed to hug me while Sarah began typing rapidly on her laptop. Well, that was illuminating, she said without looking up. They're scared. The threats, the attempted compromise, they're running out of options. But they're not giving up, I said softly, showing them Robert's warning text. No, they're not, Sarah agreed. Which is why we need to move faster than they expect. I've already filed the emergency financial protection order. Now we're going to do something they won't anticipate. She pulled out a fresh legal pad. We're going to audit every financial transaction from your marriage, every loan, every credit card charge, every family tradition that involved your money. And then, we're going to use their own weapons against them. For the next several hours, we combed through years of financial records. Each discovery made me feel sicker. The pattern of manipulation was so clear now. How had I not seen it before? Look at this, Jess pointed to a series of charges. All these shopping trips where Patricia used your card. And here, the loans to Amy that were never repaid. We're talking thousands of dollars. Sarah nodded grimly. And each instance was preceded by emotional manipulation, guilt trips, or threats. Classic financial abuse tactics. My phone buzzed again. David this time. You're making a huge mistake. Come home now, and we can forget this ever happened. Mom's willing to reduce the shopping budget. Don't throw away our marriage over money. I showed the message to Sarah, who immediately added it to her evidence file. Notice how he's still not acknowledging the real issue? It's still about the money for them, not about your autonomy or rights. Jess squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing, Rachel. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. The rest of the day passed in a blur of legal documents and strategy sessions. Sarah filed motion after motion, building a fortress of legal protection around me. But it was exhausting, seeing my marriage dissected into exhibits and evidence. As evening approached, Sarah sat back in her chair, studying me thoughtfully. You know they're not going to stop, right? This is just the beginning. Are you ready? for what comes next. I thought about David's text, about Patricia's threats, about the life I'd thought I was building. Then I thought about the freedom I'd felt walking away, about the strength I'd found in standing up for myself. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm ready. Whatever they throw at me, I'm not backing down." Sarah smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her all day. "Good. Because tomorrow, we're going to show the Andersons exactly what happens when they mess with the wrong woman." The sun was setting over Denver as Jess and I left Sarah's office, casting long shadows across the city streets. My phone had finally stopped buzzing. Perhaps the Andersons had realized their tactics weren't working. "You know what you need?" Jess said suddenly, linking her arm through mine. "A new power outfit. Something that says, 'I'm a boss who won't be manipulated.' And we're going to buy it with your own money, on your own terms." For the first time in days, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Shopping not as a tool of control, but as an act of empowerment, not to please others, but to please myself. "Yes," I agreed. "Let's do that." As we walked toward the shops, I felt lighter somehow. The Andersons had tried to break me, to force me into their mold of what a wife and daughter-in-law should be. Instead, they'd forced me to become something else entirely: strong, independent, and absolutely done with their manipulation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, but tonight, I would focus on reclaiming something they'd tried to take from me. My joy in simple pleasures, my right to make my own choices, my power to say no. The war wasn't over, but I was no longer fighting alone. And that made all the difference. Morning light filtered through the windows of Sarah Klein's conference room as I stared at the document before me. The preliminary audit of my finances during my marriage to David revealed a disturbing pattern that made my stomach churn. Sarah pointed to various highlighted sections, each one representing a moment when my boundaries had been violated. "These restaurant charges," Sarah noted, tapping the paper with her pen, "show Patricia using your credit card for lunch meetings with her society friends. Over $50,000 in the past year alone." She flipped to another page. "And here's the paper trail of those emergency loans to Amy for her failed boutique venture. Another $30,000 that was never repaid." Jess, who had taken the morning off from her nursing shift to support me, let out a low whistle. "That's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?" Sarah nodded grimly. "We haven't even gotten to the vacation expenses, the country club memberships, or the numerous charitable donations made in the Anderson family name, all funded by Rachel's accounts." A knock on the door interrupted our review. Sarah's assistant entered with an urgent expression. "I hate to interrupt, but there's something you need to see." She handed Sarah a tablet displaying a local society blog. My heart sank as I read. The headline, "Anderson Family Shopping Tradition Disrupted by Unstable New Wife." The article was a masterpiece of subtle character assassination. It painted me as an unstable gold digger who had married into the prestigious Anderson family only to have a mental breakdown when asked to participate in cherished family traditions. Patricia was quoted extensively, expressing deep concern for my mental health and profound disappointment in my behavior. "Well," Sarah said after a moment, "they've just handed us another piece of evidence for our case. Defamation is a serious matter." She began typing notes on her laptop. "But we need to move quickly. They're trying to control the narrative." My phone buzzed with a text from Janet, my boss. "Have you seen the article? Don't worry, we're handling it. Focus on taking care of yourself." Attached was an official statement from our company's PR department, defending my professional reputation and hinting at legal action against anyone spreading false information. The support meant everything, but I couldn't shake the sick feeling in my stomach. The Andersons were trying to destroy everything I'd built, all because I'd refused to be their personal bank account. Sarah cleared her throat, drawing my attention back to the matter at hand. We need to discuss next steps. The emergency separation order is in place, but given their latest moves, I recommend we proceed with divorce proceedings immediately. The word divorce hung heavy in the air. Despite everything, it felt final in a way that made my chest tight. But then I remembered David's cold eyes as he demanded I bankrupt myself for his family's shopping spree, and my resolve strengthened. "Do it," I said firmly. "I want this over." Just then, my phone lit up with another text, this time from an unexpected source. It was Mark, David's younger brother. "I know what they did was wrong. I have proof of other things too. Things you should know about. Can we meet?" I showed the message to Sarah, who read it with narrowed eyes. "It could be a trap," she warned. "Or it could be exactly what we need. Let me arrange a safe meeting." Within an hour, we were seated in a private room at a downtown cafe with Jess positioned at a nearby table as backup. Mark arrived alone, looking nervous and disheveled, very unlike his usual polished self. "You need to know something," he said without preamble, sliding a USB drive across the table. "I found these on Mom's computer. She's been planning this for months, not just the shopping spree, but everything. The goal was to get you to drain your accounts, to make you financially dependent on them. They've done it before." Sarah plugged the drive into her laptop, and we watched in silence as emails and documents appeared on the screen. Correspondence between Patricia and David discussing their plan for me. Spreadsheets tracking my assets and income. Lists of previous daughters-in-law who had been similarly manipulated. "Why are you showing us this?" I asked Mark, studying his face for any sign of deception. He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. "Because I'm done being part of their games. What they did to you, what they're still trying to do, it's wrong. And," he hesitated, "they're planning something bigger. Mom's convinced some of her society friends to blacklist you professionally. They're trying to make it impossible for you to work in Denver." Sarah was already taking notes, her expression focused. "We can use this, all of it. Mark, would you be willing to make a formal statement?" He nodded, though fear flickered across his face. "They'll disown me." "They'll try," I said softly, remembering my own fear of standing up to them. "But you'll find out who your real family is." For the next 2 hours, Mark detailed years of financial manipulation and social coercion perpetrated by his family. Each revelation made me more certain I'd made the right choice in walking away, but also more worried about what they might do next. Back at Sarah's office, we began preparing for the inevitable backlash. "We need to get ahead of this," Sarah declared, already drafting press releases and legal notices. "They want to play dirty? We'll show them what that really means." My phone buzzed again. David this time, his message surprisingly calm. "We need to talk. Just you and me. No lawyers, no family. Please, Rachel, for the sake of what we once had." I stared at the message, feeling the pull of memories. Good times we'd shared, moments when I'd truly believed in our love. But those memories were tainted now by the reality of who he really was. "Don't respond," Sarah advised, seeing my expression. "Anything you say can be twisted and used against you. Let me handle all communication." The rest of the day passed in a blur of legal documents and strategy sessions. By evening, we had a clear plan of action: file for divorce immediately, pursue criminal charges for financial abuse, and prepare for a public battle over the truth about the Anderson family. As Jess drove me back to her apartment, where I was still staying, she glanced at me with concern. "How are you holding up, really?" I thought about the question, watching Denver's lights twinkle in the growing dusk. "I'm scared," I admitted, "but I'm also angry, and maybe that's good. Maybe being angry is better than being afraid." "Damn right it is," Jess agreed, taking a turn toward her neighborhood. "And you know what? You're going to come out of this stronger than ever." When we reached her apartment, another surprise was waiting. A small group of women had gathered. Colleagues from work, friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage, even Mrs. Rodriguez from my old neighborhood. Each carried food, wine, or simply words of support. "Janet told us what's happening," explained Maria, my colleague from the marketing department. "We wanted you to know you're not alone." As we shared wine and stories, I realized something profound. The Andersons had tried to isolate me, to make me dependent on their toxic version of family. Instead, they'd helped me discover my true support system, strong women who lifted each other up instead of tearing each other down. My phone buzzed one final time that evening, another text from Mark. "They know I helped you. Mom's furious, but I don't care anymore. The truth needs to come out." I showed the message to Jess, who smiled grimly. "Looks like you're not the only one breaking free from their control." Later that night, as my friends departed and the city settled into its nocturnal rhythm, I sat on Jess's balcony with a final glass of wine. The Andersons thought they could break me by threatening my reputation, my career, my very place in Denver, society. What they didn't understand was that they'd already given me the greatest gift possible, the push I needed to reclaim my power. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Patricia's society friends might indeed try to blacklist me. David might make good on his threats. The road ahead would be difficult. But looking out over the city lights, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to earn love through compliance, but the solid hope of a woman who knew her own worth. The Andersons had tried to buy my submission with threats and manipulation. Instead, they'd taught me the true value of standing up for myself. And that was something no amount of money could buy. The morning dawned cold and gray as I sat in Sarah Klein's office, staring at the latest piece of evidence Mark had provided. On her computer screen was an email chain between Patricia and several prominent Denver socialites, outlining their plan to systematically destroy my professional reputation. The calculated malice in their words made my hands shake. "They're calling it Operation Exile," Sarah said grimly, scrolling through the messages. "They've already contacted several major firms in the area, spreading rumors about your mental stability and professional competence. But they made one crucial mistake." I looked up, meeting her steady gaze. "What's that?" "They put it in writing," she replied, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Every threat, every lie, every coordinated attack, it's all documented. And now, thanks to Mark, we have proof of malicious intent." Jess, who had taken another morning off to support me, leaned forward in her chair. "So, what's our next move?" Before Sarah could respond, her assistant burst into the office looking flustered. "Turn on the local news. Now." Sarah grabbed her remote and the wall-mounted TV flickered to life. My heart stopped as I saw Patricia Anderson's perfectly composed face filling the screen. She was standing outside the Cherry Creek Shopping Center, surrounded by sympathetic-looking reporters. "As a mother," Patricia was saying, her voice trembling, with practiced emotion, "it breaks my heart to see my daughter-in-law suffering like this. We only wanted to include her in our family traditions, to help her understand the responsibilities that come with being an Anderson. Instead, she's chosen to attack our family's reputation with baseless accusations." The camera panned to show Amy and several other society women nodding solemnly. David stood slightly apart, looking appropriately concerned and devastated for the cameras. "They're getting ahead of the story," Sarah muttered, already typing rapidly on her laptop. "But they don't know what we know." My phone buzzed. Janet again. "Don't worry. Our PR team is already preparing a response. Just got some interesting information about Patricia's own financial history. Stay strong." Sarah's assistant appeared again, this time with a thick folder. "The financial forensics team just delivered their preliminary report. You're going to want to see this." For the next hour, we pored over documents that painted a disturbing picture. The Anderson family's supposed wealth was largely smoke and mirrors, built on a foundation of borrowed money and manipulated appearances. Patricia's shopping addiction had nearly bankrupted them twice, and David's own finances were a mess of hidden debt and overextended credit. "This explains so much," I whispered, remembering all the times they'd pressured me to cover temporary expenses. They weren't just trying to control me. They needed my money to maintain their lifestyle. Sarah nodded grimly. "And now we can prove it. But we need to move carefully. They're desperate, and desperate people are dangerous." As if to prove her point, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of me entering Sarah's office building, followed by a text. "TikTok. Time's running out to fix this the easy way." Jess peered at the message. Over my shoulder. "They're having you followed? That's it. We're getting you a security detail." Sarah was already on it, speaking rapidly into her phone, but I barely heard her. My attention was caught by something in the financial reports, a pattern of transactions that made my blood run cold. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "look at these transfers, the timing, the amounts. They've been planning this for over a year. The shopping spree wasn't just about tradition. They needed it to cover these debts." Sarah studied the documents, her expression hardening. "This goes beyond financial abuse. This is organized fraud. They've been systematically targeting wealthy spouses, draining their resources, then discrediting them when they try to fight back." A knock at the door made us all jump. It was Mark, looking even more disheveled than before. "They know I helped." "You," he said without preamble. "Mom's frozen my accounts, canceled my cards. They're trying to lock me out of everything." Sarah immediately shifted into action mode. "Sit down. Tell me everything. We need to document this retaliation." As Mark detailed the Anderson family's latest moves, I felt a strange calm settle over me. They thought they could silence us with threats and social pressure, but they didn't understand what they were really fighting against. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about exposing a pattern of abuse that had gone unchecked for too long. My phone buzzed again, another news alert. The local business journal had picked up the story, but not in the way Patricia had planned. The headline read, "Anderson Family Fashion Empire, a House of Cards?" The article, while careful to avoid direct accusations, raised questions about the family's financial stability and business practices. "That's just the beginning," Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. "Once we file these documents in court, everything becomes public record. Their whole carefully constructed facade will crumble." Jess squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing, not just for yourself, but for everyone they've hurt." The rest of the day became a whirlwind of legal filings, press statements, and strategy sessions. Sarah's team worked tirelessly, building a case that would be impossible to ignore. But it was exhausting, seeing my marriage and the past 3 years of my life reduced to exhibit numbers and legal terminology. As evening approached, Janet called with unexpected news. "Remember that major client we've been courting? They just signed with us specifically because of how you're handling this situation. They said they want to work with a firm that stands by its people." It was a small victory, but it meant everything. The Andersons thought they could destroy my professional reputation, but they'd underestimated the power of truth and integrity. Later that night, back at Jess's apartment, I received one final message, from Robert this time. "I've seen the evidence Mark provided. I can't stay silent anymore. Tell your lawyer I want to make a statement." I showed the message to Jess, who was preparing dinner in her small kitchen. She paused, wooden spoon in hand. "Looks like the Anderson empire is crumbling from within." As we sat down to eat, CNN breaking news flashed across Jess's TV screen. The story about the Andersons had gone national, but not as a simple society scandal. Instead, it was being reported as a potential case study in financial abuse and social coercion. They wanted publicity, Jess observed dryly. Looks like they're getting it. My phone had finally stopped buzzing with threats and manipulation attempts. Instead, it was filling with messages of support from unexpected sources. Other daughters-in-law who'd been pressured and bullied, professional women who'd faced similar attempts at financial control, even some of Patricia's former friends who'd witnessed her behavior over the years. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same person who'd tried so desperately to please the Andersons. She was stronger, wiser, and absolutely done with being manipulated. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Andersons wouldn't go down without a fight, and their desperation made them dangerous. But for the first time since this all began, I wasn't afraid. They'd tried to break me, to force me into their mold of what a wife and daughter-in-law should be. Instead, they'd forced me to become something else entirely, a woman who knew her worth and was ready to fight for it. The war wasn't over, but the truth was finally coming to light. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. A soft ding from my phone interrupted my thoughts. An email from Sarah with the subject line, "Tomorrow's game plan." I opened it, ready to face whatever came next. The Andersons had taught me one valuable lesson. Sometimes the best revenge is simply standing in your truth, no matter how hard they try to silence you. Sarah's office was unusually crowded that morning. Robert Anderson sat quietly in one corner, his usual polished appearance notably disheveled, while Mark paced nervously by the window. The television mounted on the wall silently played footage of Patricia's latest press conference, where she stood surrounded by her society friends, all wearing expressions of practiced concern. "Let's begin," Sarah said, closing her office door with a decisive click. "Robert, you said you have something to share with us?" Robert cleared his throat, unable to meet my eyes. "I should have spoken up years ago. What Patricia's been doing, it's not just about the shopping sprees or social status. There's more, much more." He pulled out a worn leather portfolio and began spreading documents across Sarah's desk. Bank statements, property deeds, and what appeared to be private investigator reports created a paper trail of deception spanning decades. "Patricia has a pattern," Robert explained, his voice heavy with guilt. "She identifies wealthy individuals, usually successful professional women, and orchestrates marriages between them and people she can control. Then she systematically drains their resources through emotional manipulation and social pressure." Sarah leaned forward, her expression intense. "And you have proof of this? Everything's here, including—" He hesitated, glancing at me, apologetically. "Including the dossier she compiled on Rachel before encouraging David to pursue her." My stomach lurched. "She planned this? From the beginning?" Mark stopped pacing long enough to interject. "Mom had David's whole courtship scripted. The accidental meeting at that charity gala, the seemingly spontaneous proposal, all carefully orchestrated. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Every sweet memory, every moment I'd treasured, had been part of an elaborate con. I thought about our first meeting, how charming David had been, how he'd seemed to share all my interests and values. It had been too perfect." Sarah was already scanning the documents, her face growing grimmer with each page. "This goes beyond financial abuse. We're looking at organized fraud, conspiracy, possibly even RICO violations." A knock at the door interrupted us. Sarah's assistant entered with a tablet displaying a breaking news alert. Patricia Anderson was giving another interview, but this time she'd brought reinforcements. 3 former daughters-in-law who were claiming I had a history of mental instability and financial manipulation. "Unbelievable," Jess muttered from her position by the door. "They're actually paying people to lie about you?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. Those women. They're not former daughters-in-law. They're actors. Patricia uses them whenever she needs to discredit someone. Sarah was already on the phone with her investigative team. Within minutes, they'd identified all 3 women, local theater performers with connections to Patricia's social circle. "This keeps getting better," Sarah said, adding the information to her growing file. "They're not just lying. They're committing perjury on national television." My phone buzzed with a text from David. "It's not too late to stop this. Come home, apologize to Mom, and we can fix everything. Otherwise..." The threat hung unfinished, but its meaning was clear. They were escalating, becoming more desperate as their carefully constructed facade began to crack. Janet called next with disturbing news. "Someone tried to access our client files using your credentials. I caught it immediately, but you should..." "No, they're trying to frame you for corporate espionage." Sarah overheard and immediately began drafting another legal motion. "We need to get ahead of this. Robert, are you willing to testify about everything you've told us?" Robert nodded slowly, looking years older than he had just days ago. "Yes. It's time someone stopped Patricia. I wish I'd done it sooner." Mark put a hand on his father's shoulder. "We all should have done something sooner. But we can make it right now." As if on cue, my phone lit up with another news alert. One of Denver's most respected investigative journalists had picked up the story, but not as the society scandal Patricia had tried to spin. Instead, the headline read, "Financial Predation in High Society, the Dark Side of Denver's Elite." Sarah's team had been feeding information to select media outlets, carefully building a narrative backed by solid evidence. Patricia's attempts to paint me as unstable were backfiring as more people came forward with their own stories of manipulation and abuse. "The tide's turning," Sarah observed, watching the story unfold across multiple news channels. "But this is when they'll be most dangerous. They've got nothing left to lose." She was right. Within hours, Patricia launched a new attack. Somehow, she'd obtained private photos from my college years and was trying to paint me as a wild party girl who'd trapped David into marriage. But she'd miscalculated. The photos actually showed me volunteering at charity events, leading student organizations, and working multiple jobs to put myself through school. "She doesn't understand," I said softly, watching Patricia's latest attempt at character assassination backfire spectacularly. "She can't destroy me with the truth because I'm not ashamed of who I am." Janet called again, this time with better news. "The board just reviewed everything. They're not just standing by you, they're promoting you. They want someone with demonstrated integrity leading our new ethics compliance division." It was a stunning reversal of Patricia's attempts to destroy my career. But the victory felt hollow as I thought about all the other women who hadn't been as fortunate, who'd been broken by the Andersons' manipulation. "We need to do more," I told Sarah. "This isn't just about me anymore. How many others have they done this to?" Sarah nodded, already understanding where I was going. "Class action?" "Yes. And we need to set up some kind of support system, resources for others who've been financially abused." The rest of the day was spent building the framework for what would become the Financial Empowerment Network, a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse and manipulation. Janet immediately offered corporate sponsorship, and other companies began reaching out as well. As evening approached, Robert and Mark prepared to leave. The toll of their revelations showed on their faces, but there was also relief. The relief of finally choosing truth over family loyalty. "Patricia will never forgive us," Mark said quietly as he gathered his things. "Maybe not," Robert replied. "But I can finally forgive myself." After they left, Sarah, Jess, and I remained, reviewing the day's developments and planning our next moves. The evidence Robert had provided opened up new avenues of investigation, potentially leading to criminal charges against Patricia and her enablers. My phone buzzed one final time. Another message from David, but this one was different. I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. I showed the message to Jess, who snorted skeptically. Too little, too late. She was right, of course. No apology could erase the calculated deception, the years of manipulation, the attempted destruction of my life. But somehow, seeing David finally acknowledge his wrongdoing helped me let go of the last lingering doubts. Later that night, as Jess and I shared takeout in her apartment, we watched the story continue to unfold on national news. Patricia's carefully constructed image was crumbling, taking down several prominent society figures with it. The hashtag financial abuse is domestic abuse was trending, sparking important conversations about power, control, and money in relationships. You know what's crazy? Jess said, reaching for another spring roll. They thought they could break you by threatening your reputation. Instead, they made you a symbol of resistance against financial abuse. She was right. Every attempt the Andersons had made to destroy me had only made me stronger, more determined to fight not just for myself, but for others. Their weapons, money, social status, manipulation, had become tools for positive change. My phone had finally stopped buzzing with threats and accusations. Instead, it was filled with messages of support, offers of help, and stories from others who'd faced similar battles. The silence from the Andersons spoke volumes. They'd finally realized they couldn't control this narrative. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, watching the truth finally come to light, I felt at peace. The Andersons had tried to make me a victim of their greed and manipulation. Instead, they'd helped create something they never intended: a movement for change, a voice for the voiceless, a force for accountability in a world that too often ignored financial abuse. The war wasn't over, but the victory no longer belonged just to me. It belonged to everyone who'd ever felt trapped by financial manipulation, everyone who'd been silenced by social pressure, everyone who'd been told to sacrifice their autonomy for the sake of family harmony. And that was a victory worth fighting for. The courtroom felt suffocating as I sat beside Sarah, watching Patricia Anderson take the witness stand. Her designer suit couldn't hide the strain showing around her eyes, the slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hands as she placed them on the Bible to be sworn in. Today was the first day of what the media had dubbed the Anderson financial abuse hearings, and the gallery was packed with reporters, social activists, and several of Patricia's former victims who had come forward after the story broke. Mrs. Anderson, Sarah began, rising from her seat with calculated precision. Please tell the court about your annual family shopping tradition. Patricia straightened her spine, attempting to project her usual air of social superiority. It's a cherished family custom, designed to help new members understand their responsibilities and position in society. And these responsibilities, Sarah continued, they always involved significant financial obligations from the new family members, correct? We have certain standards to maintain, Patricia replied stiffly. Anyone joining the Anderson family needs to understand that. Sarah nodded, then gestured to her assistant, who began displaying financial records on the courtroom's monitors. Let's talk about those standards, Mrs. Anderson. In the past decade, how many daughters-in-law have declared bankruptcy after participating in your family traditions? The color drained from Patricia's face as the evidence mounted. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications, each telling a story of systematic financial manipulation and abuse. Robert and Mark sat in the gallery, their testimony from earlier still hanging heavy in the air. Janet had given me the morning off to attend the hearing, but my phone kept buzzing with supportive messages from colleagues. The marketing firm had become an unexpected ally in this fight, using their resources to help spread awareness about financial abuse. Your Honor, Sarah continued, I'd like to enter into evidence Exhibit C, a detailed dossier prepared by Mrs. Patricia Anderson prior to my client's marriage to her son. This document outlines my client's financial assets, career prospects, and potential vulnerabilities to be exploited. The judge leaned forward, studying the document with growing concern. Patricia's lawyer jumped up to object, but the evidence was already on record. The systematic nature of their manipulation couldn't be denied. Jess squeezed my hand as Sarah methodically dismantled Patricia's carefully constructed facade. Each question revealed another layer of calculated abuse, another instance of using social pressure and family obligations to extract money from unsuspecting victims. The afternoon session brought David to the stand. He looked different, haunted, almost, as he faced the consequences of his actions. Sarah showed no mercy in her questioning, exposing his role in the scheme. "Mr. Anderson," she began, "please explain to the court why you married my client." David shifted uncomfortably. "I loved her," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Did you love her before or after your mother identified her as a potential target?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. David's silence spoke volumes. The proceedings continued into the evening, each testimony adding another piece to the puzzle of the Andersons' sophisticated financial predation. Former household staff testified about overheard conversations, society friends admitted to participating in the pressure campaigns, and financial experts detailed the pattern of systematic abuse. Back at Jess's apartment that night, we watched the news coverage of the day's events. The story had evolved beyond a simple society scandal. It was now sparking national conversations about financial abuse and coercive control. My phone lit up with a message from an unexpected source. "Amy, I never understood what we were really doing. I'm sorry." The apology felt hollow after everything that had happened, but it was another crack in the Anderson family's united front. One by one, their allies were distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with exposed predators. Sarah called late in the evening with updates. The judge had granted our request for a complete audit of the Anderson family's finances, and more victims were coming forward each day. The case was becoming a landmark battle in the fight against financial abuse. Tomorrow would bring more testimony, more evidence, more battles to fight. But tonight, watching the truth finally emerge in a court of law, I felt vindicated. The Andersons had tried to break me, to force me into their pattern of victims. Instead, they'd created their own worst nightmare, someone willing to fight back, to expose their schemes, to give voice to all those they'd silenced. The war wasn't over, but justice was finally being served, and that was worth every moment of pain it took to get here. Sarah's office hummed with nervous energy as we prepared for the next phase of our legal battle. The preliminary hearings had exposed the depth of the Andersons' manipulation, but today we faced a different challenge. Patricia's high-powered legal team had filed a countersuit, claiming emotional distress and damage to their family's reputation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially after yesterday's revelation about their long history of financial predation. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "They're getting desperate. Patricia's been making calls all morning trying to pressure the judge through social connections." Janet appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand and determination in her eyes. "The firm's board just approved an unlimited legal budget for your defense. We're not letting them silence you." Sarah looked up from her stack of documents, a slight smile playing at her lips. "They don't understand what they're really fighting against anymore. This isn't just about Rachel or the Anderson family. This has become a movement." She wasn't exaggerating. Outside her office windows, I could see television crews setting up for another day of coverage. The story had resonated far beyond Denver's social circles, touching a nerve with anyone who'd ever felt financially manipulated or coerced by family obligations. Jess arrived with breakfast and more news. "You won't believe who just went public with their story. Remember Elizabeth Carter? David's ex-fiancée who supposedly had a mental breakdown before their wedding?" Of course I remembered. "Patricia." had often used Elizabeth's story as a cautionary tale about unstable women who couldn't handle the pressures of being an Anderson. Now, watching Elizabeth's interview play out on Sarah's office television, the truth was finally emerging. "They nearly destroyed me," Elizabeth explained to the sympathetic reporter. "When I refused to transfer my trust fund into their control, Patricia started spreading rumors about my mental health. David stood by and watched as his mother systematically dismantled my life. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Mark. Mom's having an absolute meltdown over Elizabeth's interview. She's threatening to expose family secrets if we don't stop this." Sarah's response was immediate. "Let her. Every threat they make, every attempt at intimidation, just proves our case." The rest of the morning was spent preparing for court. Our legal team had grown, now including experts in financial crimes and domestic abuse. The Andersons' attempts to paint this as a simple family disagreement had backfired spectacularly. As we gathered our materials to leave for the courthouse, an unexpected visitor arrived. Amy stood in Sarah's doorway, looking nothing like her usual polished self. "I want to testify," she announced, her voice shaking slightly. "About everything. The planning meetings, the dossiers on potential targets, all of it." Sarah exchanged glances with her team. "You understand this would mean testifying against your own mother?" Amy nodded, twisting her designer handbag strap. "I have to. What we did, what I helped them do, it was wrong, and I can't live with it anymore." Her testimony would be devastating to Patricia's case, but I felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. Amy had been as much a victim of her mother's manipulation as anyone, just in a different way. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and protesters, signs reading "Financial abuse is domestic violence" and "Stop the Anderson family" fraud waved above the crowd. Patricia's attempts to control the narrative had sparked a national conversation about financial coercion and family dynamics. Inside, the courtroom was equally packed. David sat with his new legal team, steadfastly avoiding my gaze. Patricia's usual society friends were notably absent. No one wanted to be associated with the scandal anymore. Sarah's opening statement was masterful. "Your Honor, what we're seeing here isn't just about a shopping spree or family traditions. This is about a systematic pattern of identifying, isolating, and financially exploiting vulnerable women under the guise of social inclusion. The evidence mounted throughout the day. Financial experts detailed the sophisticated nature of the Andersons' schemes. Social workers testified about the psychological impact of financial abuse. Former victims shared their stories of manipulation and coercion. But it was Amy's testimony that changed everything. She methodically detailed years of watching her mother identify and groom potential targets, of participating in elaborate schemes to pressure women into financial submission, of witnessing the destruction of lives and relationships. The shopping spree tradition, she explained, her voice steady despite Patricia's glare, was just one part of it. Mom would identify successful women with significant assets or earning potential. She'd orchestrate meetings with David or Mark, guide the relationships, plan elaborate weddings that put the brides in debt. Then the real manipulation would begin. Patricia's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed the testimony to continue. The pattern Amy described was too consistent, too well documented to ignore. During a brief recess, Janet pulled me aside with more news. The story's gone international. Women in similar situations are coming forward worldwide. You've started something bigger than any of us imagined. My phone had been flooded with messages of support and solidarity. The hashtag #StandWithRachel was trending, along with "Financial abuse is abuse." What had started as a personal stand against manipulation had become a catalyst for change. Back in session, Patricia's carefully constructed defense continued to crumble. Her own financial records revealed a pattern of living beyond her means, using manipulation and social pressure to maintain her lifestyle at others' expense. The day ended with Sarah introducing our final piece of evidence, a recording of Patricia herself explaining her system to a potential co-conspirator. The conversation had been captured by Mark's phone during one of their family strategy sessions. Patricia's voice filled the courtroom. These career women, they're so desperate to belong, to be accepted by the right people. They'll pay any price, sacrifice anything, if you make them believe it's for family. The trick is to break them slowly, make them think it's their choice. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Patricia's lawyer seemed stunned by the callousness of her words. As we left the courthouse that evening, I felt a strange mix of emotions. The Andersons' carefully constructed world was unraveling, but there was no joy in watching a family destroy itself. Only a grim satisfaction that the truth was finally coming to light. Jess drove me back to her apartment, where we found more. Supporters had gathered. Women from my support group, colleagues from work, even some of Patricia's former victims, all there to show solidarity. "You've given us our voices back," one woman said quietly. "You've shown us we're not alone." My phone buzzed one final time that night. A message from David. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stand up to her sooner." The apology came too late to save our marriage, but perhaps it wasn't. Too late for David to save himself from his mother's toxic influence. Tomorrow would bring more testimony, more revelations, more steps toward justice. But tonight, surrounded by a community of survivors and supporters, I knew that something fundamental had shifted. The Andersons had tried to use money and social status as weapons of control. Instead, they'd helped create a movement for change. The war wasn't over, but the victory would belong to every person who'd ever felt powerless in the face of financial abuse. And that was worth every battle we still had to fight. The Financial Empowerment Network's first official meeting filled the community center's largest room. Women from all walks of life gathered, sharing stories that echoed with familiar patterns of manipulation and control. I stood at the podium, still adjusting to my role as the organization's founder and spokesperson, watching faces light up with recognition as they realized they weren't alone. Sarah sat in the back, taking notes for our ongoing legal proceedings while Janet networked with corporate sponsors who'd stepped forward to support our cause. The media presence was minimal. We'd made it clear this was a safe space for survivors, not a press opportunity. A young woman raised her hand during the question period, her voice trembling slightly. "How did you know when to walk away?" "I keep thinking maybe if I just try harder, spend a little more, they'll finally accept me as family." The question hit close to home, bringing back memories of my own struggles with the Andersons' manipulation. Before I could respond, another voice spoke up from the audience. "You'll never be enough for them," Amy said, standing from her seat near the middle of the room. "Trust me, I grew up watching my mother do this to woman after woman. It's not about acceptance. It's about control." Amy's presence at these meetings still surprised me, but her insights were invaluable. Since breaking away from Patricia's influence, she'd become an unexpected ally in our fight against financial abuse. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Mom's making moves again. She's trying to freeze family assets before the court can access them. Dad's stalling her, but you should tell Sarah." I gestured Sarah over and showed her the message. Her expression hardened as she immediately began typing on her phone, alerting her financial crimes team. The meeting continued, with women sharing resources and strategies for reclaiming their financial independence. A corporate lawyer offered pro bono services for those navigating complex divorces. A therapist specialized in financial trauma provided insights into healing from monetary manipulation. Janet approached the podium with news from our latest initiative. The Financial Literacy Program is ready to launch in 3 local high schools. We're teaching young people to recognize the warning signs of financial abuse before they become victims. The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause. Education was proving to be our most powerful weapon against the cycles of manipulation that had trapped so many. My phone lit up again, a message from an unknown number. "You think you've won? Patricia Anderson sends her regards. Hope you're ready for what comes next." I showed the threat to Sarah, who added it to her growing file of evidence. The Andersons. Desperation was showing in increasingly dangerous ways. After the meeting, a small group gathered at Jess's apartment to discuss next steps. The Financial Empowerment Network had grown beyond our initial vision, becoming a force for systemic change. "The Legislative Committee wants your testimony next month," Sarah explained, spreading documents across Jess's coffee table. "They're finally taking financial abuse seriously as a form of domestic violence." Janet nodded, adding her own update. "And the corporate response has been overwhelming. Companies want to implement financial abuse awareness training. They're seeing how this affects their employees' well-being and productivity." A notification popped up on my laptop, another news alert about Patricia. She'd been spotted at Takazaki, Denver International Airport, apparently fleeing to her sister's estate in Europe. But something about the timing felt wrong. "It's too obvious," Sarah mused, reading the article over my shoulder. "She wants us to think she's running scared." This is another play. Right on cue, my phone rang. Robert calling with urgent news. "Patricia's not going to Europe. She's meeting with her old society friends, planning something big." I overheard her on the phone before she left. The pieces started falling into place. Patricia's apparent flight was a distraction, meant to lower our guard while she orchestrated her real move. "Check the court filings," Sarah instructed her team. "Look for anything submitted in the last 24 hours. Within minutes, we had our answer. Patricia's lawyers had filed a motion seeking to freeze all assets connected to the Anderson family name, including the funds we'd set aside for the Financial Empowerment Network. "She's trying to shut us down," Jess realized, her voice tight, with anger. "She thinks if she can cut off our funding, the whole movement will collapse." But Patricia had miscalculated again. Within hours of the news breaking, supporters began stepping forward. Other survivors, corporate allies, even some of Denver's old money families who'd grown tired of Patricia's toxic influence. "Let her try to shut us down," Janet declared, already coordinating with our backup donors. "She doesn't understand what she's really fighting anymore. This is bigger than her now." My phone buzzed with messages of support from unexpected sources. Elizabeth Carter, David's ex-fiancée, offered to tap her family's foundation. Mark pledged his trust fund, finally fully breaking from his mother's control. As evening fell, we gathered for an emergency strategy session. The Financial Empowerment Network had evolved from a support group into a movement, and we needed to protect it. "We'll restructure," Sarah explained, sketching out legal diagrams. "Create multiple entities, distribute the resources, make it impossible for anyone to shut us down with a single legal move." The work continued late into the night. Every attempt Patricia made to destroy what we'd built only made it stronger, more resilient. My phone lit up with one final message, from David this time. "I know what Mom's planning. I want to help stop her. Not for you, but because it's the right thing to do." Looking around at the determined faces of my support system, I felt a surge of gratitude. The Andersons had tried to isolate me, to break me through financial manipulation. Instead, they'd helped create a community of survivors turned advocates. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, watching these strong women work together to protect others from abuse, I knew we'd already won the most important victory. We'd broken the silence around financial abuse, created resources for survivors, and built a network of support that couldn't be destroyed by legal maneuvers or social pressure. The war wasn't over, but we weren't fighting alone anymore. And that made all the difference. The financial forensics team had uncovered something big. Sarah's office buzzed with tension as we gathered around her conference table, studying the documents spread before us. Records of offshore accounts, shell companies, and a complex web of financial transactions all pointed to one devastating conclusion. Patricia Anderson's manipulation went far beyond Denver's social circles. She has operations in at least 5 other cities, Sarah explained, highlighting key transactions. Always the same pattern. Identify wealthy women, orchestrate marriages into trusted families, then systematically drain their resources through social pressure and emotional manipulation. Janet studied the evidence with growing concern. The scope of this is staggering. We're not just dealing with family shopping sprees anymore. This is organized financial predation on a national scale. My phone lit up with an urgent message from Robert. Patricia's calling in favors. Major players in the financial sector. Old money families. Anyone who might be implicated if everything comes to light. She's trying to build a wall of silence. Jess leaned over my shoulder to read the message, her nursing schedule forgotten in the face of this new crisis. She's scared. For the first time, she's genuinely scared of exposure. Sarah nodded grimly. And that makes her dangerous. We need to move carefully. One wrong step, and she could bury all of this under legal threats and social pressure. Knock at the door interrupted our discussion. Amy entered, clutching a designer laptop bag that seemed at odds with her now subdued demeanor. I found Mom's backup drives, she announced, placing a collection of external hard drives on the conference table. Everything's here. The victim profiles, the manipulation strategies, the network of collaborators. The room fell silent as Sarah's tech team began downloading the drive's contents. Years of calculated predation, documented in meticulous detail. Spreadsheets tracking victims' assets, psychological profiles identifying vulnerabilities, even scripts for family members to use when pressuring targets into financial submission. My phone buzzed again. David this time. Mom knows about the drives. She's calling an emergency family meeting. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. Sarah was already mobilizing her team. We need to get this information to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit before Patricia can contain it. This isn't just civil litigation anymore. We're looking at potential federal charges. Janet added her own resources to the effort. Our corporate legal team is standing by. We'll need them to trace the business connections, the shell companies, everything that made this operation possible. As we worked, my inbox filled with messages from other survivors who'd recognized Patricia's pattern. Women from Seattle, Chicago, Boston, all sharing stories of marriages that had become traps, of family traditions that drained their resources, of social pressure that left them broke and broken. Each city had its own Patricia, Sarah observed, mapping the connections. A respected society matriarch who coordinated the targeting and manipulation. They created a network of financial predation hidden behind a veneer of social respectability. A breaking news alert flashed across the office television. Patricia Anderson had called a press conference, surrounded by her remaining society allies. Her voice dripped with practiced sincerity as she denounced the vindictive accusations of disturbed individuals. "These women," she declared, gesturing to her supporters, "represent the true values of our community. We will not stand by while malcontents and gold diggers attempt to destroy our family traditions." But her performance lacked its usual polish. The cracks were showing, in her slightly trembling hands, in the forced smiles of her increasingly nervous allies, in the conspicuous absence of many familiar faces from her social circle. My phone lit up with another message from Mark. Mom's calling in her last markers. Board positions, charity donations, political connections. She's promising anything to maintain support. But people are starting to distance themselves. The evidence from Amy's drives was damning. Patricia hadn't just manipulated individuals. She'd created a sophisticated system of financial exploitation, complete with training manuals for family members and psychological profiles of potential targets. Sarah's team worked through the night, coordinating with law enforcement and financial regulators. The scope of the scheme was staggering. Millions of dollars had been extracted from successful women across the country, all under the guise of family obligations and social inclusion. As dawn approached, Janet arrived with fresh coffee and more news. The corporate world is finally paying attention. Major companies are implementing financial abuse awareness training. Banks are developing protocols to identify and prevent coercive control. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for exposing this. I lost everything. To a family just like the Andersons in Boston. For years, I thought I was alone." The message was followed by dozens more. Survivors reaching out, sharing their stories, offering support and resources. What had started as my personal stand against the Andersons had become a national awakening to the reality of financial abuse. Sarah's assistant burst in with breaking news. Patricia's carefully constructed alliance was crumbling. Society matrons, in other cities, fearful of exposure, were beginning to cooperate with investigators. The wall of silence was breaking. "She'll make one last power play," Sarah predicted, studying Patricia's latest press statement. "People like her always do. We need to be ready." Right on cue, my phone rang. Patricia herself, calling from an unlisted number. Sarah quickly set up a recording device as I answered on speaker. "You think you've won?" Patricia's voice was cold, calculated. "But ask yourself, are you ready for what exposure really means? How many lives are you willing to destroy? How many respected families will fall?" I met Sarah's eyes, receiving a slight nod. "The only lives being destroyed are the ones you've already targeted. The only families falling are the ones who chose to participate in your schemes." Patricia's laugh was brittle. "Oh, my dear. You have no idea how deep this goes. Board members, politicians, philanthropists. Do you really think they'll let their comfortable worlds be disrupted? One word from me, and your little crusade will disappear beneath an avalanche of legal and social pressure." But her threats had lost their power. The evidence was too strong, the survivor network too extensive, the momentum for change too great. "It's over, Patricia," I said quietly. "The truth is already out there. No amount of social pressure or legal maneuvering can hide it anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had lost its aristocratic polish. "You've made a terrible mistake. The consequences..." Sarah cut in smoothly. "The consequences of financial abuse and exploitation? Yes, those are finally becoming clear. Your court date is next week, Patricia. I suggest you spend your time preparing a defense rather than making threats." After the call ended, the office erupted into activity. Sarah's team began preparing for the inevitable legal counterattack. Janet coordinated with corporate allies to protect survivors from professional retaliation. Jess organized support services for the growing network of women coming forward. My phone buzzed one final time that night. Robert. "Patricia's leaving the country, but she's left instructions for her lawyers to scorched earth everything. Be careful." Looking around at the determined faces of my support system, I felt a strange calm. The Andersons had tried to break me through financial manipulation and social pressure. Instead, they'd helped create something they couldn't control. A movement for change, a network of survivors turned advocates, a fundamental shift in how society views financial abuse. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Patricia's desperate, final moves, the complex legal battles ahead, the ongoing work of supporting survivors and preventing future abuse. But tonight, watching these strong women work together to expose the truth and protect others, I knew we'd already achieved something remarkable. The war wasn't over, but the victory would belong to everyone who'd ever felt trapped by financial manipulation and social coercion. And that was worth every battle still to come. Sarah's office overlooked the Denver skyline as storm clouds gathered. On the horizon, a fitting backdrop for the news we'd just received. Patricia Anderson had been detained at the Canadian border, attempting to flee with millions in undeclared assets. The carefully crafted facade of the society matriarch had finally crumbled completely. They found the offshore accounts, Sarah explained, spreading new documents across her desk. Not just Patricia's, the entire network. Every city, every collaborator, every dollar extracted through manipulation and coercion. Janet studied the financial reports with growing amazement. The scale of this. It's beyond anything we imagined. Private school tuitions, country club memberships, charity galas, all funded by pressuring victims into financial submission. My phone buzzed with an urgent message from Robert. They're seizing the family properties, all of them. David's having a breakdown, Amy's with him. This is really over. The magnitude of the collapse was staggering. The Anderson empire, built on decades of financial exploitation, was being dismantled piece by piece. But there was no joy in watching a family destroy itself. Only grim satisfaction that the truth had finally come to light. We need to focus on the survivors now, Jess reminded us, laying out plans for expanded support services. Many of these women will need help rebuilding their lives, their careers, their sense of self-worth. A knock at the door interrupted our discussion. Mark entered, looking exhausted but determined. Mom's lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea deal. She's willing to provide information about other families involved in the scheme, but she has conditions. Sarah's expression hardened. Let me guess. She wants to maintain her social status, keep some of the assets, preserve the Anderson family name. Mark nodded wearily. She still doesn't understand. She thinks this is just another society scandal that can be managed with the right connections and enough money. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Elizabeth Carter. The Boston network is unraveling. 3 more families exposed. Thank you for giving us the courage to speak up. The domino effect was spreading across the country. In each city, survivors were coming forward, sharing their stories of financial manipulation and social coercion. The wall of silence that had protected these predatory families for generations was finally breaking. Janet arrived with fresh reports from our corporate partners. Major financial institutions are implementing new protocols to identify and prevent coercive control. The SEC is launching an investigation into the network's business dealings. As we process the latest developments, Amy appeared in the EI doorway, her designer outfit replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. David's agreed to testify about everything, the targeting, the manipulation, all of it. The news hit me with unexpected force. David, who had once been complicit in his mother's schemes, was finally choosing truth over family loyalty. It wouldn't erase the past, but it might help prevent future abuse. Sarah's team worked late into the night, coordinating with law enforcement and financial regulators across multiple jurisdictions. The evidence painted a picture of systematic exploitation that had gone unchecked for decades. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from other survivors, each story adding another piece to the puzzle. Women who had been pressured into depleting their savings, taking out loans, sacrificing their financial independence, all in the name of family tradition and social acceptance. We're seeing a pattern, Sarah observed, mapping the connections between different cities. Each network had its own version of Patricia, a respected society figure who coordinated the targeting and manipulation of successful women. The television in Sarah's office played continuous coverage of Patricia's arrest. The footage showed her being led away in handcuffs, her perfectly maintained image shattered. Her society friends were notably absent, having quickly distanced themselves from the scandal. She never saw it coming, Mark mused, watching the news. She truly believed her social status would protect her forever. A breaking news alert caught our attention. The FBI had raided the offices of several prominent society families in Chicago and Boston, uncovering evidence of similar financial predation schemes. Janet's phone rang. More corporate sponsors pledging support for survivor assistance programs. "This isn't just about justice anymore," she explained. "Companies are realizing how financial abuse affects their employees, their productivity, their bottom line." As evening approached, Sarah gathered us for a strategy session. The legal victory was important, but the real work was just beginning. We needed to create lasting change, to prevent future generations from falling victim to similar schemes. My phone lit up with a message from David. "I know it's too late for us, but I want to help make this right. Tell me what you need." The offer was complicated by our history, but we couldn't afford to turn away allies in this fight. Every voice added strength to the movement. Every story helped expose the truth about financial abuse. Jess organized a late-night meeting with Survivor. Support groups. Women from all walks of life gathered to share their experiences, their recovery strategies, their hopes for the future. The healing process was different for everyone, but the common thread was clear. They were reclaiming their power. Sarah's assistant brought in new evidence discovered during the property seizures. Documents dating back decades revealed the systematic nature of the Anderson family's operations. Training manuals for manipulating targets, psychological profiles of potential victims, detailed strategies for using social pressure to extract financial compliance. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Patricia's refusing to see any of us. Her lawyers say she's planning something, but they don't know what. Be careful." The warning was unnecessary. We'd learned to expect desperate moves from cornered predators, but the days of operating in shadows were over. Every attempt at manipulation or retaliation would only strengthen our case. As midnight approached, Janet delivered surprising news. The governor's office called. They want to establish a task force on financial abuse and coercive control. They're asking for our input on legislation. The development was unexpected, but welcome. Change wasn't just happening in courtrooms and corporate offices. It was reaching the highest levels of government. My phone lit up one final time that night. A message from an unknown number. "Your story gave me the courage to leave my own Patricia. Thank you for showing us we're not alone." Looking around at the dedicated team working to expose truth and protect survivors, I felt a profound sense of purpose. The Andersons had tried to break me through financial manipulation and social pressure. Instead, they'd helped create a movement that would outlast their schemes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Patricia's desperate final moves, the complex process of dismantling generational systems of abuse, the ongoing work of supporting survivors and preventing future exploitation. But tonight, watching these strong women work together for change, I knew we'd achieved something remarkable. The war wasn't over, but the victory would belong to everyone who'd ever felt trapped by financial coercion and social manipulation. And that was worth every battle still to come. The storm outside had passed, leaving the Denver skyline clear and bright. A fitting metaphor for the clarity that comes after exposing long-hidden truths. We had more work to do, more battles to fight, but the path forward was clear. The era of silent suffering was over. And in that moment, watching the city lights twinkle like stars, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this all began. Hope. Not just for myself, but for every person who'd ever felt powerless in the face of financial abuse. We were creating change, one story, one survivor, one victory at a time. The night was far from over, but the darkness no longer held any fear. We had found our light, our voice, our power, and nothing, not Patricia's schemes, not social pressure, not generational systems of abuse, could take that away. A year had passed since that fateful dinner when Patricia Anderson tried to force me into bankruptcy through a manipulative shopping spree. Today, I stood at the podium in the state capitol, preparing to testify before the Legislative Committee on Financial Abuse Prevention. Sarah sat in the front row, her presence reassuring as always. Janet and Jess flanked her, representing the corporate and medical sectors in our fight against financial exploitation. The chamber was packed with survivors, advocates, and media representatives. My phone buzzed quietly, a message from Robert. Patricia's sentence was confirmed this morning. 20 years, no chance of early release. It's really over. The news settled over me as I began my testimony, sharing not just my story, but the stories of countless others who'd found their voice through our movement. The Financial Empowerment Network had grown beyond anything we'd imagined, with chapters in every major city. Financial abuse thrives in silence, I explained to the attentive legislators. It hides behind family traditions, social expectations, and the shame that keeps victims from speaking out. Today, we're breaking that silence. Sarah approached the podium next, presenting the legal framework for our proposed legislation. The Anderson case exposed a nationwide network of financial predation, but it also showed us how to fight back. These protections will help prevent future abuse and support survivors in rebuilding their lives. Janet followed with data from corporate partners showing the economic impact of financial abuse. Major companies had implemented training programs, revised policies, and created support systems for employees facing financial coercion. My phone lit up with another message. Amy this time. Dad's doing better in therapy. The Foundation's first grants go out next month. We're finally doing something good with the Anderson name. The Anderson Family Foundation for Survivor Support had been Amy's idea, a way to transform her inheritance from a symbol of exploitation into a force for positive change. Robert and Mark had immediately pledged their shares, and even David had contributed. Jess presented the healthcare perspective, detailing the physical and psychological toll of financial abuse. Her research had helped establish financial coercion as a recognized form of domestic violence, leading to improved medical protocols and support services. A notification popped up on my tablet. Elizabeth Carter was launching similar legislation in Massachusetts. The movement was spreading, state by state, creating a network of protection and support. During the lunch break, Sarah shared updates from her legal team. The last of Patricia's Society network is facing indictment. The wall of silence is completely broken. Women are coming forward daily with new evidence. Janet added her own news. 3 more corporations joined the Financial Abuse Prevention Alliance this morning. The business world is finally taking this seriously. My phone buzzed with a message from Mark. Mom's appeal was denied. She's still trying to maintain control from prison, but no one's listening anymore. We're free. The afternoon session brought survivor testimony. Women from all walks of life shared their experiences of financial manipulation and coercion. Each story was unique, but the pattern was familiar. The gradual erosion of independence, the use of social pressure to enforce compliance, the shame that kept them silent. The Anderson case wasn't just about one family, Sarah explained to the committee. It exposed a systemic problem of financial abuse hidden behind social respectability. This legislation will help protect future generations from similar exploitation. As the hearing concluded, my phone lit up with notifications. The story had gone viral again, this time focusing on the positive changes emerging from the scandal. Financial freedom and our survivor strength were trending nationwide. Back at Sarah's office, we celebrated quietly with the team that had stood by me through everything. The view of Denver's skyline reminded me how much had changed in just 1 year. Remember when we thought this was just about a shopping spree? Jess mused, handing out champagne. Look at what it became. Janet raised her glass. To breaking the silence and breaking the cycle. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from David. Watching your testimony today, you've created real change. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to stand up to Mom sooner, but I'm proud of what you've accomplished. The words stirred complex emotions, but they no longer had the power to hurt me. I'd found my strength, my voice, my purpose. The Andersons had tried to break me through financial manipulation and social pressure. Instead, they'd helped create a movement that would protect others from similar abuse. Sarah gathered us for a final strategy session. The legislative battle was just one front in our ongoing fight against financial abuse. We had support programs to expand, awareness campaigns to launch, survivors to help. Looking around at these strong women who'd become my true family, I felt profound gratitude. The path hadn't been easy, but we'd walked it together, supporting each other, fighting for change. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new opportunities to help others reclaim their power. But tonight, we celebrated how far we'd come and honored the strength of survivors everywhere. The war against financial abuse wasn't over, but we'd changed the rules of engagement. No more silence, no more shame, no more accepting manipulation in the name of family tradition or social acceptance. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.